All right, good evening, everybody. I am Jeff Colton, senior reporter with City and State, and it's my pleasure to introduce everybody to our annual Labor 40 Under 40 event, honoring some of the rising stars in New York's labor movement. This is a big anniversary. This is the 1-year anniversary of City and State's last in-person event. And it's really killing me. You know, if this were an in-person event, we would have a whole bar, we would have drinks named after, parts of the labor movement. I was trying to dream them up. I was like screwdriver, maybe a painkiller. If anybody has some ideas, please throw those in the chat. We'll save them. We'll do them next year at the Labor 40 Under 40. Instead, all I've got is a cup of water, but we're doing our best. It's been a really big week for the labor movement as well. I'm sure many of you watched Meghan Markle, the princess of the United Kingdom, standing up for labor, saying that, SAG-AFTRA, when she was a member, would have stood up for her in a way that the Crown itself didn't. It was funny, but it was also, it was really amazing. It was really amazing for her to do that. So we tried to get Meghan Markle to join us tonight. She said she couldn't, but we got some other stars of the labor movement who I will introduce soon. But first, I wanted to thank our sponsors. That is Teamsters Local 456, the United Federation of Teachers, and Local 764 of IATSE, IATSE. Thank you so much to the sponsors tonight for helping us. And I think that's it. Look, I'm sorry if I missed some sponsors. There's a lot of unions that are here supporting. And we have 5 incredible panelists joining us here today. That's Barbara Bowen, Kyle Bragg, Pat Kayne, Louis Piccani, and Wayne Spence. And I'm going to throw it to them, actually, to introduce themselves, because we're going to have a 45-minute roundtable or so talking about the labor movement. And then at the end, I'm going to shout out our incredible 40 under 40 on the labor list. So with that, I have warned our panelists, and I want the first question. I want all of them to briefly introduce themselves, and then in 1 minute, just tell me what is one reason for optimism in the labor movement or your sector of the labor movement. It's been a hard year. We really are hitting on that 1-year anniversary. And this is an event that's looking towards the future, to the rising stars. So what is a reason for optimism? And I will start with Pat Kayne of NYSNA. Go ahead, Pat. I think you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, I was muted. Of course, I've gotten that over with, right, Jeff? So we're good now. But really, Jeff, thanks to you, and thanks to everyone. Thanks to City and State for having me here tonight. Congratulations to all of the honorees, some really great talent. I think you guys did a great job really highlighting some of the great talent and up and coming people in the labor movement. So my name is Pat Kayne. I'm a registered nurse. I'm the executive director of the New York State Nurses Association. We're a statewide union of around 40,000 registered nurses and other healthcare professionals. So optimism, I'd say for myself, and I think for all of us and our sector, the vaccine is definitely something to be really optimistic about. You know I've been doing some volunteering in some of the vaccination pods, and I have to say, I think that's been, just been an incredible experience to be part of that effort. And I think the other thing, for us in particular is, the pandemic certainly laid bare a lot of the inadequacies, a lot of the racial disparities in our healthcare system. And I think in this moment, it's a time when a lot of the things that we've been talking about, the Nurses Association, I'm really optimistic that we can get a lot of those things addressed. And I think just the idea of workers being essential and folks really, unfortunately, the sacrifices that we had to make in the labor movement to be there and to, save around 140,000 New Yorkers. But, I think it's finally clear what our role is here in New York. So thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Over to Wayne Spence, please. Introduce yourself and give us a reason for optimism.
Yep. Thank you. And thanks for having me. And I'm grateful that City and State is going to be recognizing one of PEP's own. So again, I'm Wayne Spence, President of the Public Employees Federation. We're from Buffalo to Long Island. We represent the professional, scientific, and technical titles in New York State government. That's a mouthful. And I'm really glad, to be president of this union. I'm the first African-American president of the union and the first union president to be elected south of the Tappan Zee Bridge in PEP's 40-something years being a union. My reason for optimism, for the people that you are actually highlighting, for what I saw this summer, what I saw that young folks have done, not across the country, but across the world, to recognize that on any given day back this summer, there were protests going on in about 6 or 7 towns just on Long Island alone, then New York City in every borough, then Buffalo, then Syracuse. Then my kid is showing me pictures of what's going on in Paris and in Brazil. And it was just phenomenal in the Philippines. It showed me that's the optimism that the status quo is not going to be around. And that is why I also got optimism again watching television the other night when King Harry recognized his own, the ability that his privilege, and recognized that, his family missed an opportunity and the country missed an opportunity with Meghan Markle. So I think when people own that, there's optimism because nobody's now hiding it, under a rug. It's coming forth. And that's my optimism, because if you can own it, then we can deal with it and we can move forward.
Thank you so much. Over to Louis Piccani. Please introduce yourself and a reason for optimism.
First, I want to congratulate everybody that was selected and nominated. And I'm actually honored to be with such a great panel. Really, everybody has labor in their heart, everybody on this panel. So it's really, I'm thrilled to be here tonight. My name is Louis Piccani. I'm the president and principal officer of Teamsters Local 456. We're part of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Optimism. I think in general, everybody is fed up, mirroring what everybody is saying. And I think now we need a change in the political environment. And I think we have to start holding all the politicians accountable for their actions, because they all sit here, they'll put their arms around us, swear they're labor friendly. And as soon as they're elected, they do nothing for us. I think President Biden is doing a great job already, starting to change some of the laws. He has a lot of work to do ahead of him, but I think all of our local and state officials should look at what's going on. And everybody says the unions declined, especially since the 50s. We've declined because laws have been set up against us. That's the only reason. People want to be union. They want to get a better life for themselves and their families. And the way to do that is to organize labor. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things holding us back from organizing. And I think it's time for a change. I think it's time for a labor revolution in this country. Like Brother Spence said, you looked at France, you looked around the world, and people are rising up saying we're not taking it anymore. And I think you're going to see that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Kyle Bragg, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank City and State for hosting this every year and celebrating our labor's rising stars, particularly one of our own, my Vice President, Political Director, Candace Tolliver. I'm Kyle Bragg, and I'm president of SEIU 32BJ. We're a public service union of essential workers of about 175,000 across the East Coast, with 85,000 right here in the city. I grew up in the labor movement, and I think what makes me most optimistic about the future is several things. One, I think what this pandemic has done is pull back the curtain on inequities that a lot of my brothers and sisters already articulated earlier, and that people across the globe and in America see that the labor movement is the way to attack social and economic injustices that exist for workers in this country and across the globe. And you can see now that the resurgence of the labor movement is happening. People are going towards labor unions instead of going away from them. And the rhetoric of big corporations and companies no longer working on workers because they see that the inequities continue to exist and that the economic disparities continue to grow. The wage disparities continue to grow from the top to the bottom. And so the answer to that is unions. And I also am very encouraged that now we have these vaccines that we hope that it gets out to the population. Our members have just been included in that population. And this is a way I think that we will come out of this pandemic. And I encourage each and every essential worker who's eligible to go out there and get vaccinated because we have to continue to move out of this pandemic. We have to make sure that we keep our families, our friends, our co-workers safe, and this is the way to do it. So thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, over to Barbara Bowen.
Great. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight, to be with labor comrades and colleagues. It's really wonderful. Thank you, City and State. Congratulations to all those honored and also all those under 40, even under 30 or over 40 who are part of this movement. Your pictures all don't turn up in City and State, but it's a very big movement. And that's really thrilling for all of us. That in itself is a source of optimism. I'm especially thrilled that one of our own, Stuart Davis, who's a rank and file organizer and worker and a professor at CUNY, is included among the honorees. Also one from our statewide affiliate, NYSET, and several other CUNY graduates and others are here. The one from NYSET is Jake Crawford, so it's really great. What gives me a sense of optimism tonight actually is in part listening to the unity of view among the others who've spoken. I too was going to speak about the fact that we have seen a real exposure, that finally there's been an exposure that I hope is unmissable of how deeply racism structures our whole society, our economy, our universities, our healthcare system, our housing, every single part of what we live and do, private as well as public. And I think it's so important not only that that's been seen and seen at great cost. People have paid with their lives exposing that, but seen, and also that the response was an uprising. And that, as several of you said, that labor is looking internationally, that we're looking at other places internationally, that we can't miss that, that this is a moment of possibility for what you call, Louis, labor revolution. I think it is a possibility of a period of movement and change and broader social, economic, political change. I think it's a moment where what's happened through this pandemic and the way popular movement has made it understood has revealed that what was normal is not what we are hoping to get back to. That normal was killing some of us and was designed to kill some of us. And we've got to change it. So that gives me optimism, that shared sense and that international sense and the movement that's represented. So, and also I'll just say one other thing, that there was cheering for workers, cheering for healthcare workers, cheering every night at 7 o'clock for workers. We all know we have to go beyond cheering and we have to put something behind that. But the visibility of workers and healthcare workers in particular, and the bonds between us, I think, are a possibility that we must seize and amplify for real optimism.
Thank you so much. A couple notes to the attendees. If you're on Zoom and if you're in the chat, please toggle it so it's to panelists and attendees. So everybody who's going can see your chat. Facebook, same thing, feel free to talk to everybody. And also I will be trying to pull some questions from the audience Q&A in Zoom. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. Upvote your favorites, and I'll try and get to those later in the conversation. Back to this, I want to keep on talking about this past year and reasons for optimism. It's been a year with the pandemic, and I've heard both ways. Some people saying that the labor movement is going to come out so much stronger In fact, some of you just did. And then some fears that the labor movement is going to come out weaker because of this. We already talked a little bit about it, but I want to just expand on that. Does anybody have concerns here about the future, about maybe the effect of the pandemic on either unionization overall or your specific sector? And I'll open that up to anybody.
Okay, I'll go after Wayne.
Yeah, please,
Well,
Wayne.
I think for most of I can speak for almost everybody who's on this panel with me and a lot of the union leaders. Unions stepped up when employers failed our members during the pandemic. From PPEs, we had to go out and source them many times. On numerous occasions, lots of unions spends a lot of money that was not budgeted for to make sure our members stayed safe. And I think for those people who were not in the union or might have been fee payers, they saw it. We even gave to people, when we did distribution, it didn't matter what union you were in. We distributed as much as we could. And I think we also showed up. Bradley, one of the people that's been honored, even before there was vaccine, he was out there making sure that our members' rights were protected, because there were many times management tried to take advantage of the confusion. If anybody can remember back in March, April, and May, lots of confusion. Things changed daily, sometimes hourly. And management tried to take advantage of that with our members, and suggested at many times would have been putting our members' lives and their health and the health of their family. See, this didn't just affect us at the work site. This is one of those things that you can bring it back home, and your loved one, what you do at work could have a direct impact on the health and safety and your life of your loved ones back home. And so I believe the way the union showed up and the way we stood strong and pushed back. And at times, even when we were pushing back, we knew pushing back and saying no to management or this is ridiculous, and even going to the press was not enough. You still had to go out and source things and get what was needed for our members to do their jobs and to protect the community at large. And we did that. So I know I can speak from that point of view that this pandemic showed what it is to be in a union.
Just picking up on Wayne's comments, I think it did show what it means to be in a union and what it means to be a worker and be collective. One thing that I think we've all noticed is how much self-education went on, how much we all had to learn. Maybe the NYSMA colleagues knew a lot of this before, but how much we all educated ourselves about health and safety on the job, how much we took that on and really took responsibility and empowered ourselves through this moment as a response to failures by the employer that Wayne talked about. But to go more specifically to your question, Jeff, about a concern in our sector, I would say we have a concern in representing a university that serves largely working class people, people of color, and lower income people. We have a lot of concern about the post-pandemic university, that this crisis will be used by those in power as an opportunity to downscale, to do shortcuts, to reduce services that were already reduced too far, and that the kind of changes that many of those in power have been wanting to see will be easier to make post-pandemic. So one of the concerns we have, and it might be echoed in other sectors, is that this sort of shock doctrine fashion will be used to create a cheapened education or a degraded system as the post-pandemic system. So I think we all have to fight against that with the optimism that we talked about earlier.
So, like so many of the union members that are represented by the leaders on this call, 33J members have been on the front line of this pandemic from day one. We've unfortunately lost over 150 of our members to this pandemic during this crisis, as I know many of us have experienced that pain. But our members from day one are the ones who, as many, have not been able to enjoy the benefit of working from home or remotely working. They had to be in the midst of it. And I applaud them because, as the city was sheltering in place, it was our members that made life bearable in many millions of residents of the city. Their work has increased exponentially. When you're talking about all the deliveries now that take place as people are now at home and not going out, security officers who have to implement new security protocols across the city to make sure that people are safe, our residential workers who keep people comfortable, safe, and secure in their homes, our commercial building workers who are working and have been hit hardest in this layoff of in the decimation of our commercial industry, which still is somewhere at 10 or below % occupancy. Which is devastating. And these are folks who will bring the confidence for people to come back into this space, which is important for our city's economy. Our city, the commercial real estate market is so important to drive the economy of this city. And our members are at the heart of that by making and giving people the confidence to return to the commercial space, because they're the ones that are securing those buildings. They're the ones that's cleaning them and making sure they're sterile, and all the new protocols that are in place to build and to make people comfortable and build the confidence that they can return back to the office space eventually, as these vaccines are now being more broadly distributed. And at the same time, we're bargaining contracts for 20,000 more members, 10,000 security officers, 10,000 airport workers who continue to work in our airlines to make sure that people who staff to continue to travel or who must travel do so in a safe environment, in the safest way. And so, essential workers are so, as I think it was Barbara who said it, yes, it's great that we applaud them at 7 p.m., but we have to continue to applaud them in more than just hand claps. We have to recognize that their services were more than valuable, they're invaluable, and that they deserve the recognition for keeping this country, our city, our states moving in a time where many were able to do that from home. Our members had to do it on the job.
Definitely interested in hearing from Pat too. I mean, nurses, oh my gosh, been in the center of this for the past year. Is NISDN going to come out stronger, or have there been some struggles?
Well, yes, Jeff, there certainly have been a lot of struggles on the front line. I think our biggest concern right now is the recovery, because it's not over, right? I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on the vaccine, but we still have members on the front line saving people, fighting to save people that still are, afflicted with this disease. And I think that kind of gets lost. And I think like a lot of us talked about the hand clapping, and a lot of that stopped now, right? So we don't have that. We don't have a lot of the things that, people sending food and people sending things that were kind of boosting morale a little bit. And in some places, a lot of the conditions that we saw, look, we had to increase hospital capacity by 50%, right? And we kept hearing about ventilators and things like that, increasing bed capacity. Well, where was the staff going to come from? So, and we have seen a lot of retirements. We still see a lot of agency and temporary staff being utilized. What I do think personally, my biggest concern is the members themselves. And I feel like they haven't gotten a moment to recover. A lot of our employers have programs to try to support them, but unless that's really built into their day, Jeff, I don't see them able to get a breath or to even have the time. And oftentimes in healthcare, we're the last people to be taking care of ourselves, unfortunately. And it's really concerning, and we're going to pay we're all going to pay a price for that if we don't address what people on the front line have gone through, what they've been through. Someone else was talking about how this affected our families, and it absolutely did. I mean, we have members that feel, and not, and it's not far out there that they were the cause of their family members getting sick, and when we started seeing what was happening, and Barbara spoke about NISDN, and yes, we've always had a strong health and safety program. I mean, we said from the beginning what kind of respiratory protection was needed, and still we're fighting at a federal level for that to be established. all the things we've been saying all along, moving to reusable respiratory protection, we're still fighting these fights. And like, when is enough enough? You know, in terms of what you expect people on the front line to sacrifice, to give, to keep people alive, which is really all we want to do. This isn't political for us at all. You know, folks stepped up, and, you know, you heard a lot of our nurses out there at the height of this saying how they felt they were sent into battle without, you know, without the proper weapons to defend themselves and fight this thing. So good news is we're doing, you know, we have much better treatments. People are doing better when they get sick, but we're still fighting, and there's still things that we need that aren't being addressed. And the psychological toll this is taking on the front line really needs to be addressed.
Well said.
If you forgive me, I just quickly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we have school janitors who also have committed themselves to making a school safe for our students and our teachers to return to those classrooms. Incredible work every day.
Gotta love the school janitors, of course. Now, it's been so interesting from my perspective as a journalist, where unionization has, at least it seems to have been growing in the past few years. We've seen some major publications and the writers unionizing, and there's been a real grassroots movement there. But I get the impression that that's not true for workers as a whole across either the state of New York, which is one of the most unionized states, or across the nation. I want to ask about this, and I'll go to Louis first. You know, do you expect the percentage of unionized workers to grow in the coming decade, or are we continuing to see a shrinkage of the sector?
Before I answer that, I just want to introduce Dominic Casanelli Jr. He's Teamsters Local 456's Vice President and honoree tonight. I'm so proud of all the hard work he does, the drive, and the love in his heart for this labor movement. And I can honestly say I love him like a son. He's tremendous. He's phenomenal at the work he does. So thank you, Dominic. I see actually
for our 40 nominees who are not on camera right now. So thank you for representing everybody. Sorry, back to you, Louis.
And I think we're going to see an increase in the labor movement. And one reason this pandemic did was show that all workers are essential. You know, beforehand, you would do your job. People took advantage of you or just ignored what you did. We represent 42 municipalities, bus companies, detention officers, heavy highway, oil, building material. All were part of this pandemic of keeping the country moving. So, you know, you go in the morning, you throw your garbage out, you just come home from work, you know it's gone. But as people were quarantining and sick in their houses, throwing waste out to the garbage, we were exposed to that. And like the brothers and sisters said prior, you know, bringing it home to our families. And, you know, yeah, we're essential, but then when we're looking to get vaccinated, you're not that essential. So we weren't some of the vaccinated, and it's a shame. And in our work, in our line of work, none of us look for a pat on the back. Nobody looks for acclimates saying, oh, you did a great job. But recognize us when we have to be recognized. So don't just use us as a tool, but, you know, for the media to just say, oh, yeah, we're going on. And I'm afraid of now, when this is over, you know, you're essential now, not over, because I don't think it's ever going away, but how essential are we going to be? Are they going to look for cutbacks and layoffs and downsizing because it's not a pandemic at this moment? And that's what we have to stop. And I believe everybody that's involved in this labor movement is going to make sure this does not happen. And, you know, for the municipal workers, the stimulus money should protect them for now. But again, it's labor who always kicks up to save the membership, you know, with the PPE, came out of the union's money. Corporations, developers, all they should start bucking up. It cannot always be on the working men and women back. You know, it has to change. So yes, to your question, I do see us picking up membership and getting stronger. I do.
Anyone else on this, please?
Well, if I can, Jeff, we're I know my union, we're fighting a budget right now. I just participated up in Rockland where they're going to close a children's psychiatric center, even though we're hearing how adolescent suicide is up. And if they close it, that means there will be nothing from White Plains all the way up to Utica for adolescents residential mental health treatment. But, but we, again, and those who do it? The workers, those essential workers, and the parents who are blue collared or marginal in terms of in the economic runs are the ones that who need those services. But that work is not sexy. So why am I saying that? It is not a new airport. It is not a bridge. And I'm saying, when are we going to really look at what is necessary? They used data saying that the facility was underutilized. I don't know how it could be underutilized. They purposely did it because there's lots of adolescents that was sitting in ERs waiting to go into residential treatment. So don't tell me it was unutilized. And if that's data, then I know for a fact that lots of bridges and airports were underutilized, but yet we have a budget that's calling for more bridges and more infrastructure when it comes to airports, because it's not sexy. I use that term, right? Because it's not shiny. We have a culture where we seem to reverence that shiny penny, and that older penny that's been around and around and now gets dull. Nobody wants to look at that. But if the two pennies, if you look at them, don't they have the same value? And I do believe that if you talk about value, wasn't the essential workers and those people that need those services the one that you call heroes? So why are we devaluing them now and treating them like zeros? And that's the problem for me when I see what's going on. And Lewis said that also. Literally, we were essential, but we weren't essential when it came to who got the vaccine. It's the ultra rich again who find a way how to play the game. It is the ultra rich again that's going to benefit from these infrastructure works that's in the budget now, and that has to stop. That really has to stop.
Pat, of course.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to my political director that's part of this great group tonight, Michelle Counsel. And, I interviewed Michelle right before the pandemic. And Michelle, and I know you highlighted this in her bio, and with everything going on in New York, Michelle came here to help us and be part of our team at the New York State Nurses Association. And I just wanted to really shout her out because I think everything we've been through and all the fighting that we've done, thank you so much for honoring our political directors. It's been great to have Michelle with us, and her courage and her fierceness at coming to New York in the middle of this thing was really something. So thanks.
Any other thoughts on the growth or shrinking of the labor sector or unionization overall?
Well, I'd say that during this pandemic is the most challenging environment that any union could be in to organize. We've been wildly successful in continuing to organize low-wage workers at the airports, and we continue to grow that sector and bring workers into 33J, into the union. I said earlier, we're bargaining a contract for over 10,000 of those workers. Workers that will now not only have a family sustaining wages, but have health care. And we know how vitally important healthcare is as this pandemic has pulled back the curtain on the great disparities that exist in our communities. And so I think that we are moving forward, the labor movement will continue to move forward. And I think that people see the labor movement as the answer to the inequities that exist. And that the big corporations have had their way long enough. And I know and I feel very confident that as we continue to talk to workers, fast food workers in the city who are desperate to organize and be recognized for the labor that they have provided during this crisis. We have companies like Chipotle who have had skyrocketing profits, but yet treat their workers so very poorly. we've fought and continue to fight for all these essential workers, not just our workers, but all essential workers to have access to the vaccine. And that's why I really have to shout out Candace Fowler, who's been doing incredible work trying to deliver these benefits to essential workers in our city. Her and her entire team, we're in this together. This is not about this essential worker against that essential worker. We know all essential workers need to be lifted up, recognized, supported, and applauded through the ways that we should applaud them. Having good family-sustaining jobs, quality, affordable health care for themselves and their families, and PPE until we get out of this crisis. And that we shouldn't have to beg for these things. It should be a right, it's an entitlement for these workers.
Now, you said until we get out of this crisis. I want to ask a question about that, actually pulled from the audience Q&A. Somebody's asking about de Blasio's recent comments that he's going to ask city workers to go back to work in offices by May. And also that the mayor said, keep your masks on until June. This questioner is basically wondering if you think that your workers are ready to go back to work by May, in offices, in person, that sort of thing. Wondering if any of you have thoughts on this.
It's not fair for me because my work has already been there. So I'll let someone else answer this.
Right. I was going to say that a lot of us, and just let me say on to your last question, when we're talking about is the labor movement shrinking or expanding, let's just say Bessemer, Alabama, and Amazon organizing, and I hope that is the harbinger of great expansion. But on your the question from the attendee, that's great. Thanks for the question. I think the first answer is that a lot of workers here, I think in every one of our unions, I mean, we've heard it very particularly from some of the unions tonight, haven't stopped working in person since this began. And even for us in the university, we have a lot of workers who have been working on campus the whole time. And there are several, I mean, obviously there's some other unions here for whom that's not even a question. And I think that's telling because there's a lot of emphasis on going back to work. And I think that largely refers to people who have had the privilege to work from home in a certain kind of job and haven't had to be working the whole time. So one thing I would say is let's not invisibilize, and I know the questioner wasn't, but just to the general public, let's not invisibilize those who've been working the whole time. It isn't a question of going back. For a lot of working class people really exposed, either healthcare workers or building workers or sanitation or people in congregate sections as settings as yours are, Wayne. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is I'd like to reframe the question. It shouldn't be really our members ready to go back to work, but are the workplaces ready for people to work there?
Yes.
Are they safe? Because it is the employer's obligation to provide a safe and healthy workplace under the law. That's the employer's obligation. And it's too often flipped around to be a psychological question or a question of courage or something for the individual worker. Are you ready to go back? I mean, we should all be asking and should be able to do whatever it takes to inspect and monitor, is the workplace ready? So is the ventilation up to the ASHRAE standards, the national standards? And it's not just distancing, it's ventilation. Have people had access to vaccines? Is there clean drinking water in every place? Are the bathrooms working? I mean, some very basic questions. So I would say the question is to the employers and to the city, in the case of the question, we better make sure that every workplace is safe and that there's testing and follow-up and tracing. And that should be the real question. When it's safe and when workers are entitled to check that it's safe and have real inspections, then we can ask that question.
I want to move on to other questions, but that definitely seemed like a great, thorough answer. I mean, just wonder if anybody else has any quick thoughts on that.
Yeah, like just to Barbara's point, I mean, we were just talking about this, right? We're still fighting for the federal government to address appropriate mandatory standards. I don't think anyone should be going back into these workplaces until we at least have that. And we've all seen, I mean, I'm sure all of us have filed OSHA complaints, and we've all seen how that has failed us. So there are things that need to be in place to protect workers before they go back into these workplaces. And so far, it's, we haven't seen as much as we need to see.
I would only add in the private real estate market that we really enjoyed a very good relationship with the industry and creating protocols and instituting the protocols that do make it safe for people in the private sector, at least, to access these spaces again. And we've been doing that from day one in the residential sector and in the schools. And so, but I agree that we have to ensure the safety of everyone, because if we don't, then we're not going to come out of this, and we should not put people's lives at risk. And again, I'm very proud of my membership. I'm very proud of our industry and working hand in hand with us to make sure that we create the protocols that create the most safe environment for people to return.
Thank you. Now, we see a couple questions in the chat asking about the PRO Act, this federal legislation which passed the House. It's being considered in the Senate, I believe. And they're asking, what are the possibilities of the legislative approach being a galvanizing force for pro-labor sentiment in the aftermath of Trump? It's a great question. I know that I certainly don't follow Washington politics very closely. I'm very focused on city and state politics, but I'm wondering if any of you have been following that legislation and have some thoughts on that.
Well, I just say I haven't followed as close as I should be, but I know our international has been very much engaged in driving this legislation to continue to lift unions up. But like you, Jeff, I'm very interested in our city. I mean, we've been able to institute in our city, in our state, Healthy Terminals Act, which brings healthcare to airport workers, paid sick leave for workers here in this city, just cause legislation, and fair work week for fast food workers. This is the way. I mean, this is the way that we lift workers up. Every worker has the right to organize and be part of a union, but every worker should have the same rights as every other worker for dignity and respect on the job. And these are some of the ways that we've been able to accomplish that through legislation. And I think this is a huge step forward that's coming from the federal government. And I applaud the Biden administration for jumping out so early in this administration, for doing the things that lift up workers, and changing the horrible attack that workers have been under in this country. And I also would say that in his first 100 days, he's attacking and using his executive powers in a way that really validates our support and our members' hard work to get them elected. And we have a union of, I said, black and brown workers and immigrant workers, and he is really turned around some of the horrible, atrocious policies that we've seen come out of the former Trump administration.
Appreciate that. Now we've got time for like one more question. We're running out of time already, but look, the 2021 elections in New York City are happening in just 3 months and 2 weeks, but who's counting? And I want to ask about this trend I've seen of a lot of unions partnering up. We've seen some joining together to make joint endorsements, with a couple of yours, in fact. And we've seen all the labor unions really getting involved, endorsing whole slates of city council candidates and more. So I'd like to go around and actually hear from all of you. Number one, if you could name just one candidate, whether it's city council level, mayor, or anything else, that everybody listening in should pay attention to, should keep their eye on, one candidate. And then also just some quick thoughts on the labor movement coalescing or working together here. Oh, Wayne, please.
Yeah. So I know we came out early for our union on the mayoral race. Now, as a state union, we usually don't get involved really that much in city politics. Usually it's Senate or Assembly or congressional districts. But we saw what Eric did during the pandemic. When Downstate Medical Center, when I got word that they only had 1 day's worth of N95s, and when I saw pictures of some of the nurses wearing garbage bags because they had no gowns, I made the phone call to Eric, and Eric called who he needed to call and got things out. He actually made sure that the nurses at Downstate got fed. And by the way, this was a hospital. If you remember, I was in a fight with a governor in 2012. We did sittings to save that hospital. That hospital was scheduled for closure. Now imagine if that hospital had closed, which is what the governor wanted. Who would have served that community, which was still underserved even with that hospital, because we know how many people died. And so because of what Eric did, we recognize and through our support behind him. It wasn't, we didn't wait for somebody to just come and visit me now. We recognize for a fact that as before he was even mayor, and I'm gonna speak into existence to a certain degree, he was there for our members. So it wasn't something that, oh, politics. This was just real life. He was there from day one for essential workers. And so we went in that route, and we did it early. And so I got some pushback for it, and I had to remind people, here's why. Let me explain to you why. And by the way, PEF was one of the first union to endorse who is now Chuck Schumer way back when he was the underdog in third place. And look where he's at now. We were the first union. So no, I'm hoping that, you know.
We want to hear from everybody. So anybody else, please tell a candidate and thoughts on, you know, the 2021 elections.
It's hard for me to just call out a candidate, but what I can say is that I've had the pleasure of working with my sister Pat and Neisner, and you know, in this important moment that we're in, where we're going to turn over, you know, a vast majority of the city council, and we, as I mentioned before, you know, all the great legislation that we've been able to pass in that progressive council, and that's through the work and I gotta give another shout out to Candace Tolliver for incredible work in working with those city council folks and legislators to pass these pro-worker legislations. And, you know, we believe that working together, we need to make sure that this continues to be the focus of the city council to put workers first. And so that's why we came together with other of our like-minded friends in the labor movement, where we could do that and find space to work together in endorsing city council candidates who we believe will again put labor and working people in the city first.
Go ahead, Pat.
I just wanted to say, you know, it's been great to be part of Labor Strong and be in the coalition with Kyle and his members and the hotel trades and CWA and all these folks. You know, and I agree with Kyle. I can't name one person. I mean, we've done like 100 screenings, and I think the idea, the optimism that Barbara and everybody was talking about, you know, that in itself, right? There's so many great people, and really people that came from people who are active in their community, that are, you know, putting themselves out there to run. I think that's another reason to really be excited. And it's just, you know, it's been incredible. It's been a lot of work, you know, all these screenings, but really so many talented people have come forward, and that's another reason to be really excited and optimistic, but I can't name one of them. Go ahead, Barbara.
I was just going to go exactly where you were, and it's not just being diplomatic, but it's really because there is a kind of resurgence, I think, and this is city and state, so I'm going to say something about the state level. You know, in the last round of state elections, we saw a real change in the state legislature and some grassroots candidates coming in, and there are more this time, and there are more of those candidates coming in, or also meeting with our folks for city council endorsements and city council future work. And I think that's the exciting thing, that we should watch the candidates whom we did support. And I think we've also heard all tonight that, you know, our main work is the actualization and support and energizing and organizing of our own members, right? That's labor. That's where we centrally are. We have to rely on our own organization and power. That's the real power of the labor movement. But I think there is a lot to look at and to keep our eyes on. There were candidates who were grassroots candidates, who were striving, who were left candidates, not just progressive, but left candidates for state office. And they're up there right now, working on those state budgets right now. We have a big opportunity this year for lots of reasons, but one is that there's a coalition that's pushing for serious end of tax breaks to the rich. In Albany, we do not have a progressive tax system in this state, and all of the places we work would be better served if the state had the revenue it should on an annual basis, not just an influx one time from the federal government. So I think watching what the candidates we have, a lot of us have supported to put in office, those grassroots candidates, what they're already doing, and pushing them to go as far as they can. This is the year to aim high, to be ambitious, and that's what we're watching.
And Lewis, I know you're mostly a Hudson Valley Union, but any thoughts here?
So I would have to refer to our joint council 16, who does a tremendous job, down in the city. So I'll go with what Sister Bowen said about our state legislation that was elected. We do have a big change up there, and we do have people that are stepping up, and they're not afraid to come out to against a political, what would be politically correct. They're actually putting people over politics. So that's a change. We're seeing that. And just recently, we had a rally in the city of Mount Vernon real quick, and about workers not getting paid. And Senator Biaggi stood up, and she came forward and just like basically called everybody out. It's not right. It's not right. So we do have some, a change coming, and it's looking for the people and for organized labor.
Thank you. And guys, I just want to thank all of you so much for joining on this panel, for sharing your thoughts on the labor movement and your own stories. Of course, now I want to move on to everybody's favorite section of the event, where I have to read 40 whole names. So congratulations so much to everybody in advance. And I seriously apologize if I mispronounce your name. Normally before this, I would mingle around the room and be like, by the way, how do you pronounce your name? No mingling tonight. But without further ado, for our Labor 40 Under 40, I want to honor Eric Antokol, the Assistant Vice President of Programs for Non-Traditional Employment for Women, Anthony Beckford, Community Advocate, Mentor, and Independent Entertainment Booking Agent, who also, I believe, is running for City Council. Angel Benitez, Second Vice President of Local 420, DC 37 AFSCME. Grace Bogdanova, Vice President of 1199 SEIU HWE. And I'm seeing lots of cheers in the chat. Please keep that going. I wish that we could all be cheering out loud together. Derek Bowers, Director of Social Enterprise, or CEO NYC. Of CEO NYC, the Center for Employment Opportunities. Derek Bowers. Dominic Casanelli Jr., Vice President of Teamsters Local 456, who I think we have right here. Susan Castle, Political Action Coordinator of CSEA. Manuel Castro, Executive Director of New Immigrant Community Empowerment, or NICE. Orlando Charles, the Chow Coordinator for the Restaurant Opportunity Center, ROC NY. Nuzat Chowdhury, the Legislative Counsel in Legislative Counsel in the New York City Council. Kelly Coughlin, Deputy Director of Labor Relations for the MTA Metro North Railroad. Jacob Crawford, PSA Secretary Treasurer of the Professional Staff Association of NYSUT. Michelle Krenzel, NYSNA Political Director, got a shout out already. Carla Cruz, Assistant Director, Legislation and Policy at the Greater New York Laborers. Aaron Darcy, Director of Government Affairs at the Consortium for Worker Education. Stuart Davis, Vice Chair of PSC CUNY at Baruch in particular. Eric Dinowitz, a DOE public school teacher and a member of UFT, also running for City Council. Jenny Encolada Malinowski, Director of Community Outreach at Laborers Local 1010. Laura Gabby, a carpenter with Carpenters Local 157, the United Brotherhood of Carpenters. I think she was the one that was wearing a hard hat in her picture in the magazine. So shout out especially to Laura if that was you. And speaking of which, I do know that if you want to follow along, you can go to City and State, check out the Labor 40 Under 40 list to look at all of the bios and the pictures. And I believe the link was dropped in the chat as well. So please check that out as you listen to me run down the names. Let's see, we are halfway. Gabriel Gallucci, Director of Government Affairs at the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators. Leilani Irvin, the Director of Homeless Services in the New York City Mayor's Office. Karina Kaufman Gutierrez, Deputy Director of the Street Vendor Project. Bradley Kolb, Field Representative for the Public Employees Federation. We got Wayne right here with PEF. Rebecca Lamort, Legislative and Communications Coordinator with the Greater New York LECET. also running for City Council, Rebecca Lamort. Amy Leibowitz, Account Supervisor with Berlin Rosen, in my email inbox all the time. Ross Lieblich, Labor Relations Specialist with NYSUT. Ryan McGarry, Community and Government Relations Specialist with the Suffolk AME. Miranda Nelson, New York and New Jersey Director of Jobs to Move America. Leah Oken, Business Representative with IATSE Local 764. Jeffrey Omura, Chair of the International Actors Committee of the Actors Equity Association, also a City Council candidate right here on the Upper West Side. Daniel Pollack, Associate Commissioner with the New York City Office of Labor Relations. Ooh, I love talking to folks at OLR, so shout out there. Connor Shaw, Assistant Political Director and Business Agent of the International Union of Journeymen and Allied Trades. Nagma Singh, Legislative Assistant at the New York State AFL-CIO. Shout out to everybody here. Bob Tiberwall, the Deputy Political Director at the New York Hotel Trades Council. Candace Tolliver, Vice President with 32BJ SEIU. Got a shout out there. Ryan Trevas, the Business Services Representative of the New York State Department of Labor. Erica Vargas, Assistant Director of Political Action and Legislation at DC 37. Patrick Weisensall, Vice President with CWA Local 1168. Andrew Weber, Project Manager at Ahern Painting Contractors, Inc. And last but certainly not least, friend of mine, Megan Wiley, Political Action Coordinator at the New York City and Vicinity District Council of Carpenters. All 40, congratulations so much to all of our 40 honorees, the Labor 40 Under 40. This is a relatively new tradition for New York's, for city and state, but it's a great one, and I'm sure that we'll keep on going, and next year we'll do it in person. I also really wanted to thank once again our sponsors tonight, Teamsters Local 456, the UFT, and Local 768 IATSE. So thank you so much to our sponsors. We got them in the chat as well. And hey, if this Zoom wasn't enough, please tune in tomorrow. City and State's hosting another installment of our Ranked Choice Voting Series. We're gonna have a couple mayoral candidates talking about RCV at 2 p.m. That's online. You can check out the event in the chat here or online at City and State New York, cityandstateny.com/events. And on Friday, we're doing an event with AARP about home essentials. So that's like internet, utilities, dealing with all of that in the pandemic with lots of star state legislators. That's going to be a great conversation. And next week, we're hosting a nonprofit BoardCon at 1 p.m. So if any of you are involved in the nonprofit sector, these events are wonderful. It's great networking. It's great information. So again, I'm Jeff Colton, a senior reporter at City and State. I want to thank once again our 5 incredible panelists for sharing their time, sharing their thoughts on the labor movement. And of course, thank everybody for tuning in today and joining City and State and honoring our Labor 40 Under 40 Rising Stars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us be here.